Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our series, chapter 2 of our webinar series for GrandCare Systems. Today's series is focusing on telehealth and virtual technology care implementation into senior housing communities. This is being recorded just like all of our other webinars. If you missed last week's webinar, which focused on disability care and implementing technology specifically into disability services, that has been recorded, and please feel free to reach out to us, sales@grandcare.com. I'm Laura Mitchell, and I am your brief host. Fortunately for you, I will only be hosting and sharing a couple things, and then I will be handing it off to my trusty panel here, who you are in for a treat today because we have Scott Feldstein, who is the US-based director of sales for GrandCare. And then we have Nora Adams, who is from Holly Creek Retirement Community. And then Daphne Carpan, who is a nurse by training and is also does some clinical advising for various organizations. But she is speaking on behalf of a client who has implemented technology into an adult day home. So without further ado, let me just take care of a couple housekeeping items here. We do have an upcoming event next Wednesday, and that is going to focus on tech-enabled home care. So last week it was disability care. This week it is senior housing, and next week it is specifically infusion of technology into home care services. If you do have any questions at all during this webinar, please feel free to ask a question under the question and answer session. We are going to make some time at the very end of the webinar to address your questions. Again, this is being recorded. If you would like to request a copy of the recording or the PowerPoint, please feel free to reach out, sales@grandcare.com, or ask your question in chat below as well. So without further ado, I think what I will do is I will hand it off to Scott Feldstein, who is our US-based director of sales, to kick it off here.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everybody. So first I want to talk for just a second about GrandCare, the company, because some people think that we're new, or I've been asked, is GrandCare in beta? No, it's not. It's been around for a very long time. The company has been around for about 15 years. And of course, the technology that we used has changed a lot over those years as well. And I guess this is kind of our brag sheet of all the mentions and awards that we've done. But most importantly, you can see that GrandCare is used by family caregivers, home care agencies, in the senior housing market, and now increasingly for disability services that we talked about last week. And of course, GrandCare is available in the US, in the UK, Canada, and some other countries. We're always looking to expand. So, oops. There we go. Thank you. Lost my slide for a minute there. So we're going to talk about GrandCare's community features. And a lot of people know GrandCare as something that can do telehealth and activity monitoring with motion sensors and, a family video call. And they know it as something that goes into a private home. And a lot of our business is in private residences, but they don't know, even people who know GrandCare don't often know that we have an entire suite of features that are specifically designed for senior housing. And we're going to talk about them. First thing you have to know is that GrandCare is a touch screen, kind of like the one you see here. And what you do is you put a GrandCare in each and every apartment. And so now we'll explore those features. There's a whole bunch. Just really briefly, so these are the ones we're going to talk about real quickly here. Community messaging and community calendaring, those are big deals in these settings. And also the resident check-in button was one of the first things we got asked to do. You can see that there's a resident directory so people can look up their neighbors. And it's a good way to distribute dining information and for other concierge type services. So here's the check-in button. Really briefly, what it does is that button appears in the morning on everyone's GrandCare, and everyone in every apartment is asked to touch it in the morning And it's usually a window of time, 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. or whatever you choose for that button to appear. And you touch it and it says, thank you for checking in. And then at 11:15, it's someone's job in the community to check up on all the people who didn't check in. So it's just a nice checkpoint for everybody. So group messaging is another really, really big deal. It's one thing to send a message to a GrandCare touchscreen, and you could do that. If you really want to send a message to a specific person, totally doable. But what if you want to send a message to your entire campus? What if you want to send a message to absolutely every apartment in your community? Or alternately, what if you want to send a message just to the Classic Car Club or some other group within your community? You can do that with the kind of group messaging that we have. You can see it's real simple, just like sending an email. And here's an example of the kind of messages that you might send. Excuse me. So you can have emergency messages, which we'll see in a second. You can send something about somebody's left something in a common area, or it just really depends. It could be anything you want. And I think the next slide is an emergency. Yeah. So that one, if makes an attention-getting sound, I like to say, even if the sound has been turned off on that touch screen, it'll turn itself right back on for an emergency message, and it will make that sound, and then it will read aloud the message to you. And of course, you can have community photos so that someone who works at that community can upload photos from your Christmas party or your barbecue or whatever it is that you've done, those activities that happen in your community. You can share those photos with everyone. Here's an example of an individual GrandCare user's schedule for the day. And you can see that there's all sorts of community events that you might go to. And I think people who are in an activities director type of role, I think that they really enjoy this feature, because if you're able to distribute all of the information about the activities that are happening in your community, it's likely that it's going to you're going to have increased participation. And if you have increased participation, you're going to have better resident satisfaction and maybe even better retention. There's all sorts of metrics that get tied to that sort of stuff. And the resident directory, really, really cool feature. So on each and every touchscreen, there's the ability to look up. You can do a search, or you can just browse a list of the people in your community and see a picture of them. And depending on the community, you could even, in some cases, initiate a video call to that other person. Video call, just like I talked about. So it's become increasingly important, especially in this day and age with the public health crisis that we've all been experiencing, to be able to have ways to connect to people that don't necessarily involve being physically close to them. And that can be a real problem if you're not admitting visitors, or residents can't visit one another, or whatever rules you might have in place for infection control. They might leave people quite isolated, and you don't want that. So the GrandCare video calling feature is a nice way to alleviate that problem. Okay, yeah, that's a big one. So we got asked by a customer so they had a salon in their community, and they asked us if wouldn't it be good if people could try and make those appointments at the salon right from their touchscreen? And we said, sure, good idea. But then we thought about it a little bit more and realized, why stop there? People could request all sorts of services from their touchscreen. Why not? So any services that are provided by the community, or that are even provided by an outside entity, some trusted partner in the community that you trust to provide that service to your residents, they can also be involved. That's a great new revenue stream for people to explore as well. And here's an example of how it works. If I want to go to the salon, and of course I do need a cut and curl, I can select what day I'd like to go. and what time of day I'd like that appointment, and maybe some details about what I want, and then send that request. And when that request is seen and looked at by the provider of that service, and if they accept it, it goes automatically right to my GrandCare schedule, right to my calendar. So I'll even get reminded about when that activity is going to happen. Yeah, like I said, increased revenue opportunities. So you can have increased utilization of the services that you provide, or you can have increased, through those outside partnerships, you can have some revenue sharing on those type of deals. And this could be anything from ordering a pizza to getting dry cleaning services, or lots of people in senior housing, even if they're in independent living, they sometimes have outside caregivers come in to provide services for them. And in some communities, that tends to be one, known entity, one known home care agency that comes in and provides those services to just about everyone there that needs it. And so they could be tied into this as well. And when your residents have the ability to request those services, then they'll be utilized more. So GrandCare is optionally, you can use it to manage your medications. GrandCare can remind you when to take your medications and what you're supposed to take. And it can even record your medication adherence right on the touch screen if you choose to use it for that purpose. It also does vitals and biometric readings. So people that are managing a chronic health condition at home, if they have to take their blood pressure or their oxygen or their temperature or whatever it is that they have to do, GrandCare can remind them to do it. And then when they take that reading, GrandCare will wirelessly record it into their chart and then let somebody know if that reading is not good. Yeah, and here's another option for everybody. It's utilizing GrandCare's motion sensors and door sensors. We even have a temperature sensor so that GrandCare can know something about what's happening in that residence. And usually this is as simple as, is there motion or is there no motion when there's supposed to be? Like, has no one been moving around in this room today from 7 a.m. to noon? There's been no motion during that time. That could be a problem, and you might want to look in on it. And it can be used in a variety of different scenarios. So that's what we refer to as activity monitoring. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Daphne Carpan, who is going to talk about one of our customers in Minnesota.
Yep, and Daphne, I'll give you the opportunity to make introductions of yourself, because you've had certainly a wide experience, both working from a clinical side of things in your day job to also previous experience with what you've worked throughout the continuum of care. So let you make the introduction to yourself, because you are certainly a valuable resource for anyone that is looking to not only implement technology, that's always been your thing, technology intersection with healthcare, but also from a telehealth perspective. So if you can just share a little bit about yourself first, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Laura and Scott. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Daphne Carpan. I'm a registered nurse. I currently have, well, Laura says a day job, but it's really a night job at a hospital. And I'm also do some clinical consulting for technology companies, including GrandCare. I'm a former GrandCare customer, and I previously deployed GrandCare in home care, hospice, independent living, and I'm firmly on Team GrandCare. So I really like to talk about the things I love and unique implementations. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Touching Lives Minnesota. Deb Delaney, the CEO, and I have worked together for several years, and she's here in Minnesota with me, and I actually am the person who does her technology installs when she adds equipment. Small equipment she adds herself, but when we start up a new building, I'm the one who goes to her facility. Touching Lives Minnesota, if you want to take a look at their website, is a kind of a unique community. She is in Savage, Minnesota, and she has a adult day health which is not the focus of her GrandCare use. But then she also has currently one community setting, and she's actually planning for 3. Number 2 is going to be installed anytime now. I'm just waiting for her to call. And then she's planning on building another facility. And her focus really is the smaller community residential facility. So her current, the install that I'm going to talk about today is her 6-room facility. She really likes to focus in on a really personalized care for the people that she's taking care of. She's very selective. And she has a model that's amazing, where they just have a flat fee for moving into the facility. So they move in and they're given sort of the services that they want. They have the option of going over to adult day health during the day for services, but her clients are, the focus is senior care, memory care, and hospice. And so sometimes her clients are not able to go over to and take advantage to adult day health. And GrandCare is included in that all-inclusive pricing for that facility. So in the rooms, at this particular facility, there's 6 rooms. And because care starts with the resident, we're kind of going to start in that end and then work outward toward the staff. Those GrandCares are installed in each of the 6 rooms. Because this was a new build, she opted to just hardwire everything in, so we didn't have to worry about a wireless network, which was nice. And families are given the option of participating. Some families are receptive to that, and some are not as engaged with the family participation piece. But they each have a GrandCare in their room. And then depending on the level of participation, families would have the ability to send letters to the touchscreen and send pictures and video chat with their loved one. As you can imagine, especially at this time, it would be very valuable for them to be able to have daily video contact with somebody when they're not able to get into the facility. And it also, I think, amazing just not to have a mask on and to be able to sort of see facial expressions, which is, I think, another barrier currently. If the families aren't really participating, or if I feel like it's going to be a little bit before the families participate, sometimes at install, I've gone around and taken pictures of the pictures that they have on the wall and then loaded those onto their GrandCare slideshow, just so that they can have something that's really personal to them, because that piece of it really drives their engagement. Each of those systems that they have in their rooms are customized to their personal interests. So we usually find out a couple of things about the individual, maybe that they like a certain kind of art, or they have a certain family website that they go to, or they have some web use that they've had previously that we want to customize the links. But these systems are mainly geared primarily toward the residents' socialization needs. There are options for kind of enhancing it up to the next level with some of their medical needs. So for example, I think that she's got a few clients that are using the care plan features. We have a care plan function where you can add certain things that you would like done for that person in particular, and then staff logs in at the touch screen with a 4-digit PIN, and they're able to access that care plan and check off the things that they're doing. And it can be very specific. It can be specific dressing changes. If there's specific instructions, it's really nice to have that as a part of the care plan, simply because then it's in the room with you while you're in there. And when you're gloved up and doing your dressing change, you're able to have that up on the touch screen and really follow those instructions specifically. And they're also using care notes for communication with family. So they're able to go into that resident room, talk about, how is your day going, what's happening, and put a nice note in there that then pushes out to the entire care team, which in the case of the systems in the resident rooms, that could be the family as well. So the family could get a quick little update about what's happening today, or, I'm feeling sad today, but here's our plan to address that. And then again, the video chat function, I just can't say enough about that, especially now. Some other things that I I can see her taking advantage of. I'm not sure if she's using this right now, but community calendar, as Scott discussed, and community messaging, you'd be able to push a message out to each of those systems for adult day health events. So if they've got something coming up in adult day health, or if they've got immunizations, let's say it's flu season and we're going to have an immunization, pushing that content out to those systems would be valuable, as well as the ability to do a telehealth visit. I'm not sure that she's doing this right now, but certainly because you have that system set up in the resident room and they're already used to video chatting with their loved ones, a provider could actually do a video visit via the platform. And they would have the option of doing vital signs equipment. I think she's maybe using that in one case at this point. Certainly the vital signs equipment, if they needed to check blood pressure on a person, that could be paired with that particular unit in the room. And then each of those residents is given a pendant, which alerts to the system, and they all have one sensor in their room. And so the sensor, as Scott discussed, the ADLs, their sensors are primarily turned on overnight. So we have the time that we try and figure out the time that they go to bed and the time they wake up, really specific to that individual. And those are set to provide alerts to the staff members that are the overnight awake staff to say, oh, they're out of bed. We need to go address that. And that's working pretty well. You have to be really focused about where you're putting it so that you catch an early out of bed versus a late out of bed, especially for somebody that's of high acuity. But what's unique about her system is that she's got these sensors and these pendants. But instead of, you would think that they would be tied to the system in each individual room, but instead of tying those to the systems in the rooms, she's tied that to a staff GrandCare system that's at the staff desk. And so all of the alerting functions for all of her 6 residents are not going to the family. Family is not having access to the rules, so they can't change those rules as needed. It's all going to this common area unit that the staff is actually using. And so as staff come on for their shift, they're able to sit down and receive those alerts, those push to the touch screen. So it makes a sound and says, who's out of bed, or so-and-so has pushed their pendant. And then it also ties to their facility phone, because we know that staff isn't sitting at that unit all the time. They're maybe in the backyard or maybe in the kitchen cooking a meal. And so they're able to then receive those alerts on the facility phone or on the touch screen. What's nice about her particular installation is because everything's all hardwired in, she actually, for the touch screen part of those alerts, doesn't even need to have functional internet at her facility, which has been a good thing because she had several internet outages at her facility. And so this kind of bypasses that. So even though the phone might not be getting the alert, the touch screen at the common area is still getting alert as long as that has power, which has a power backup. So with regard to that common area unit, then she's got that in the common area for staff to use. It's for staff use only, although they can play some of the music features from GrandCare in the common area while they're cooking a meal, that sort of thing. They use the medication reminders on that system in a kind of unique way. The medication reminders come up and they remind staff to do the med pass. And so there's instructions for going into the medication room. Here's what you're supposed to do. It just provides a reminder. And then the med compliance on that system. So when it's saying I took my meds, what it's actually doing is telling her, did the staff do the med pass? They're also using care notes for staff communication. So things like we're out of milk, who needs to get groceries, that goes out to the entire care team, doesn't go out to any family members, which is very nice. And then they're using the care plan that I described in the rooms for household duties. So things like take out the garbage, clean the refrigerator on Tuesday, throw out all of the expired food items on Thursday, and staff are checking those things off. And then on the touch screen, they have you saw the grid of possible content on the touch screen. On that common area touch screen for the staff, they're actually having buttons that are education buttons that she changes out. So they have a very expensive bathtub that requires some maintenance and a video prior to using. And so that link is on the touch screen, and they're able to use all of those sort of features on the touch screen to provide staff education for when the staff has downtime. And it's nice just because She doesn't have to provide staff with a laptop when they're at work. She can kind of control a little bit because it doesn't stream Netflix. She knows that nighttime staff isn't watching Netflix. It's sort of a little bit of controlled internet access for staff, and really addresses multiple needs for her. It does timed reminders for tasks. So things like check and make sure that everyone has the right pendant, because obviously we'd have some confusion if resident A grabbed resident B's pendant. And then it does timestamps for logging in and out of the caregiving app. So when they sit down at the desk, they put their 4-digit PIN in, and they can do their care notes and things. And it actually provides her with an extra timestamp to sort of correlate with all the rest of her payroll, that sort of thing. This model could be used in a moderate size setting. So you could envision something small like this being used on a per wing basis. So if you had like a little community within a larger facility. But Deb has just taken amazing advantage of the system and really used it to support and replace a lot of other equipment that she might have had to otherwise buy. And she's multiple times expressed to me that GrandCare is my greatest tool. And while she's happy for the family, especially now, I think happy for the family and the, the video and keeping family happy and engaged and in touch, she's really speaking about her staff and the ability to sort of have real-time communication with staff via GrandCare. So thank you very much for letting me chat. And I think I'll pass it back to Laura and Nora.
Yeah, sounds great. So thank you so much, Daphne, because that's really interesting, because there's, people think of senior housing as a typical continuum of care, whether it's independent living, assisted living, memory care, congregate living. But Deb Delaney is kind of doing a little bit of an in-between model where it's not quite the private home, but it's a little bit more of a feeling like that. And if you caught our webinar last week, Brian Hart from LAD was discussing his group homes serving folks with disabilities. So their homes only have about 4 people in them in their new construction, and they're utilizing technology in that way. So I think it's interesting to have the mix between what Deb Delaney is doing with Touching Lives in Minnesota. And I'm really excited to have Nora Adams from Holly Creek talk about what they're doing, because Holly Creek, part of Christian Living Communities, has always been on the forefront of innovation and technology. And it's a fantastic community. I have watched some of the things that are going on, and it sounds like there's always exciting events happening, and the residents also seem to be quite involved in everything that's going on. So I'll let you take this and talk a little bit about, you've been with GrandCare for I'm trying to think.
I want to say like 4 years, 4.5, maybe going on 5.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
So go ahead and share some of your experiences. Let me get you the right slide here. And thanks so much for speaking with us today. And again, if anybody has questions and answers, or if you have answers, let me know too. If anybody has questions, go ahead and post on Q&A on the bottom, and we'll try to address that at the very end. So thanks, Nora.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had GrandCare in our community here in Colorado for going on 5 years now. It's definitely been very helpful, and it's been a huge hit with the residents. We have in our main building at least 198 apartments where every apartment has a GrandCare system. So it's a very large community. And then we have cottage homes, about 26 now, that surround the building. And those residents also have the GrandCare system, which is really helpful because since they aren't in the building, it's definitely nicer for them to be able to get some messages to them, just letting them know, reminding them things that are happening in the building, because sometimes there can be kind of a disconnect for those residents who are at a different location. So the GrandCare system has been tremendous help, especially during this pandemic, and the video chat especially has been really helpful. It's been nice. I have a GrandCare system in my office actually, and I'm able to use that to video chat with residents who might be on self-isolation because they went out and took a trip and they have to come back and self-isolate afterwards. So it's been really nice for the residents to video chat each other, for me to video chat them. Our nurse has a GrandCare in her office, and so she's been able to video chat residents as well. And just even having all the different activities that you can do on the GrandCare, having the music that you can play, different games and trivia, and being able even to just read current events, accessing articles on whatever the latest headline is in sports or health news. Our residents really love that. They're always telling me that they're reading articles on GrandCare. So it's been a very helpful just in general. We love it, and it keeps everybody really interactive and up to date on everything that's going on in the community.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit more about what your residents are like? Is it independent living or is it assisted living?
The main portion of our community, about 80–85% of it, is independent living. The rest of the community is our health suites. So it's made up of assisted living, skilled nursing. We do have rehab and also memory support.
And I think that it's been interesting to everybody because COVID was something that certainly nobody planned. So how has that been for your community, particularly for the residents, but also for the staff? What has been the response, and how are you taking this time to improve morale? I know it's
overall it's been good. Obviously, just kind of like in most stories and news stories that people are seeing on the TV and reading about in the paper, it comes with challenges, both the physical piece of it, where family members can't come into the community to have a physical visit with their families. And also the emotional piece of it. It's definitely a very, very hard thing to adjust to. So, and to kind of wrap your mind around it. So the first month or two, when it was really peaking and people were really starting to have to get used to it, it was a little difficult. We did have some COVID in the community in the skilled nursing side. So we were able to keep it isolated. But we've been COVID free now for a couple weeks. And so now that things are starting to kind of the numbers are slowly going down, we are slowly starting to kind of reopen pieces of the community and have, kind of restricted communal dining again. And we're going to be able to open, we have a movie theater in the community. So we're going to actually be opening that up to a limited capacity starting next week. So that's exciting. And residents are actually pretty savvy. They're kind of figuring out ways that they're able to work around this whole pandemic. And I know that I've actually seen residents on their own have little tiny groups of being able to play bridge and various card games on their iPad online together. And so I see them social distancing all with their iPads playing bridge and really enjoying that. And people who have book clubs are still able to kind of at a distance have a book club meeting. And we're now kind of at the up and up where we're starting to get used to things and just kind of dealing with it, knowing that this is just going to this is how it's going to be for a while, and kind of taking it for what it is.
So there's a question for you on here, and it's asking, what should people keep in mind when they're selecting a technology? I think you guys are ahead of the curve in some ways. I mean, you decided to deploy technology before there was really this crisis. And now there's a lot of folks scrambling to figure out what should they think of when they're trying to install technology. There's a lot of questions about whether the residents will accept the technology or not. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah, I will say the one thing with GrandCare, which hit the nail on the head with how to be able to use the technology, is the fact that it's user friendly. when we had to, the technology that we had before we brought GrandCare in was becoming obsolete. So that's why we had to look for a new platform. And so with GrandCare, they were one of the only companies that we thought were very user-friendly for seniors. And the biggest thing, I was kind of the main person to give everybody their tablets and teach them how to use it. And the biggest problem or thing that I heard from all the residents was, it's a computer, I don't know how to use it, I'm afraid I'm going to break it. And I just repeated to them, GrandCare is super user friendly. It's very, very straightforward. You can't break it. It offers a lot, but doesn't need a lot in order to use it. So once the residents started getting used to it, they realized just I was right. It was very straightforward, user friendly. They can't break it, even though it's this new technology that they're not used to. And we're all very pleasantly surprised. So it's kind of a mixture of being able to know absolutely everything that you are looking for to have that technology address what you need, and then just making sure that you have to try it out. You have to be sure that when you do test it, does it just kind of be in the mind of the resident and somebody who did not grow up at all with technology. Is it something that seems pretty easy to use and easy to learn and not breakable? So.
And do you see a lot of them getting engagement from their family? So like that their family's sharing photos or video chatting with them or doing things like that?
Yeah, there's actually a few residents who their families are kind of maybe a little more techie or interested in that video chatting than others, and so we have opened the door for them to be able to video chat with their family member via GrandCare, the video chatting from resident to resident has also been really helpful, very useful for those who are missing their friends who they can't see for a little bit. So we do have a lot of family engagement with that, and it's been very helpful for them to, I've actually seen some, if I go in and have to, because I'm kind of the IT person also at the community, and so when I go into resident apartments, I'll notice that I see some family member pictures scrolling on their GrandCare, which is really nice.
Hey Nora, I know that didn't you say that you have actually some memory care folks in your community?
We do have a neighborhood that is a memory support neighborhood, yes.
Are those folks also using GrandCare?
We don't. Right now, we don't have the GrandCare in our system in our suites neighborhood. So all of our kind of like the more nursing home side of it doesn't have GrandCare right now. It just wasn't in the budget when we first implemented it over in our independent living side. But we actually have a lot of independent, now that it's been going on 5 years, we've had a lot of independent residents kind of transition over into assisted living, and they miss their GrandCare. And I've actually had to go and retrieve a couple of GrandCare screens that they took with them, unknowing to me. So I felt really bad too. But so we're actually, people are used to their GrandCare, and they're really wanting to take it with them when they do have to go to higher levels of care. And so we are actually looking at adding that into those neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's my question is, it's great to know that people love it that much.
Yeah.
But do you have any sense of how you might use it in those settings when you eventually do put GrandCare into those locations for those folks? Do you have a sense of how you might use it, or if it would be different than the way you're using it for the other people?
Definitely more of the clinical features, adding more of those Bluetooth, the medical devices that you kind of touched on a little bit, checking blood pressure and heart rate, things like that, keeping track of the residents' vitals and just their kind of daily check-ins with the nurses. I would definitely see that being used for sure. And our memory support, it's kind of hard. I think definitely, I mean, the biggest feature to people who do have dementia is kind of the emotional piece of their brain that really helps with their memory. And so I think definitely incorporating family members and old like family photos would be huge, I think, for the memory support as well. So probably a lot of things like that.
Okay, and then so I see another question and answer here. Question, how are you using the check-in features?
The check-in features are very important and we use them every day. So we have it set up so that the check-in button appears on resident screens, I think as early as either 4:30 or 5 in the morning. And then we have our official check-in cutoff at, I want to say 10 or 10:30. And so the concierge every single morning, they go through the list of 200 plus residents and they see who hasn't checked in yet. We give them a call afterwards if they haven't checked in. If they still don't answer their phone, then we'll send the nurse just to do a home visit, make sure that everything is fine. So it's very important to us. We have so many residents that we have to kind of keep track of. And obviously we don't have that huge of a staff to be able to track every single one of them one-on-one. So the check-in feature for us was very important and it works wonders for us. So we're very happy with that feature.
And have you seen any differences as far as staffing goes? I mean, as far as how it feels for them, as far as being able to broadcast community messages. I think I heard from one of your staff members at some point that it was nice to be able to tell everyone when the mail arrived. I think that was one of the big questions.
Yeah, it's for us, our community, we don't have any kind of intercom system, and it's a pretty large community. There's a lot of square footage to cover, so being able to we can send a message to the entire community, or we can just send it to one specific individual, or even just like one floor of one building. It's been really helpful being able to send messages immediately and to whoever needs to see it. So it's nice that we are also able to customize certain wishes or requests from residents. So we do have things like daily mail delivery. The mail has been delivered. That way residents know they don't have to keep coming down and checking, because the mail can vary on delivery time sometimes. So and the other thing too is our residents, we have a very strong knit community, and they also like to know if their friend is maybe went to the hospital or still in the hospital. And so we actually set up a care line distribution list, so to speak, where residents can let us know that they want to be a part of that list. And every other day we send that group of residents an update on if their friend is in the hospital or not. So the messaging system is very helpful, nice, especially for activities. When we could have excursions, it was really helpful just to remind the resident, hey, remember, we have this excursion today. We leave at 10:30. Make sure you're down in the lobby. So it's on various levels a very helpful feature.
And have you seen any sort of application of emergency? Have you had any emergencies that you've had to share quickly with residents?
Yeah, the fire alarm is definitely used for us. We kind of had in the past, there was an issue with our air pressure system that would cause false fire alarms. And so we would have to, fortunately that's fixed, but we will use the fire alarm message, which is just automatic default. All the settings that are needed in that messaging for that messaging aspect are already set. So we can just click one button, it populates everything that's needed in the message, including the tone, and then it just gets sent out to all the residents immediately. And so that's really helpful, because obviously not having any kind of intercom system or anything like that, we need to really let the residents know in a harmful or threatening situation, this is what you need to do.
Okay, I see a question here. What kind of staff do I need to hire to run a system like this?
Honestly, we have a variety of people who use the system on the admin side, including our life enrichment our concierge team, and then our admin team, such as myself. And so even just as the tablet itself is user-friendly for the residents, the GrandCare portal on the web is also extremely user-friendly. And the customer service has also just been fantastic. People, if you have a need to troubleshoot something with GrandCare, I'll email them, call them, and I get immediate service. So it's very user-friendly. All walks of life use it, and they don't have any trouble with it. So you don't really, whoever's on your staff that would need to have access to it would easily be able to.
And what do you do as far as concierge services? Can you explain a little bit of how that works? So they order something from the touchscreen. How does that work on your end?
Yeah, the resident just kind of goes onto their system. They just click on whatever the service is that they need. So if it's like the hair salon, they can click on that. And then we get an email. So it's basically kind of avoiding the phone traffic at the concierge desk, which can be quite heavy at times, especially now. So instead, an email is populated, and we just, whoever is in charge of that email, however the setup is, they just get the notification, and on their end, they can just put that information in their books. You know, if it's the hair salon stylist, or maybe it's maintenance, you know, they're receiving a work order for needing a light bulb changed, whatever it may be. They are able to get that information and just log it in on their system directly, rather than having the concierge have to kind of relay the message.
Okay, and this next question that's here could be for anybody on the panel, Daphne or Nora. It is, do you think that COVID and this pandemic has changed the way that senior housing will be in the future?
I can definitely speak to that. I think for sure. It's kind of a realization. It's kind of like with the doctors and hospitals realizing that virtual appointments are needed a little, you know, yesterday, so to speak. I think this is an excellent platform to be able to utilize in this moment of having to kind of keep a distance, or have, if a resident is sick or needing to be quarantined, or in self-isolation for 14 days due to travel or whatever it may be, having this technology is very helpful. Obviously, the kind of in-person communication and interaction is being adjusted to more digital platforms nowadays. So having this is definitely helpful in situations like this.
Hey, Nora, I got another question here about ordering groceries and transportation. Do you guys have outside third parties that you're partnering with to do that, or how's that working?
No, our transportation department, since the drivers aren't taking residents to kind of normal stuff, they are kind of focused a lot on grocery store orders 2 days a week. And so a lot of our residents actually have gone online and are now ordering their groceries online. And our drivers are able to go to the grocery store. Fortunately, it's just across the street, and pick up all of those orders. And so at the very least, we are able to send a message to the residents and let them know that their groceries are down there, which is nice because there's always, you know, fridged and frozen items. So that's, we're not using really, GrandCare hasn't been used for groceries yet, unless you guys partner up with the King Supers or the local grocer, but we at least can let them know that their order is in.
That's very cool, thanks. And I will add to that as we mentioned before, when a request is being made at the touchscreen, that just sends an email, and the email address can be any address that you choose. And it sounds like for you guys, it's going to internal people who are providing those services inside the community. But there's no reason why another community might have that email go out to somebody else in the community. It could go out to somebody that might be like an Uber or a grocery delivery system. So, or the pizza place down the street. You know, it can be anyone that you want.
Yeah, I had a customer that had partnered with a flower shop down the street and had allowed for the residents to order flowers, and they had made an arrangement where the resident themselves was being billed from the flower shop directly, so they were ordering it through the touchscreen. So that is definitely an opportunity, I think, for the future, that you could have it going to external sources like pizza or things like that, because the concierge platform is just for, going to anybody to request a service or an order. Now, when somebody requests a service for your salon, for example, how are they reminded of doing that service? How does the resident know that that's been confirmed? I don't know how that works internally on your system.
It shows up as a reminder message on their GrandCare screen. So it gets added to their calendar. It gets added to that specific their account, which is their apartment, and it gets added to their calendar, and then a reminder pops up to let them know.
Okay. Another question about the future of healthcare and senior housing. Do you see telehealth as being a huge feature in senior housing from here on forward?
Definitely.
And maybe Daphne wants to say something too about that.
Yeah, if Daphne has an answer to that, by all means.
No, you take it, and I'll finish up with that.
I will say that
one
of the things that we are looking at is we do have an in-house clinic, Redwood Health Clinic, for those who want to have their primary care physician in-house. And they come a couple times a week, and we're actually kind of looking to implement GrandCare into that clinic and use that for any potential needs for them. And so whether it be the doctor just talking to them through video call or actually using it to store any kind of information on the residents' health. So that's one way for sure that we're kind of looking towards for telehealth.
And do you see that as being helpful? Sorry, Daphne, I'm going to let you speak because you have so much more insight to share on this than I do probably. But do you see that as being helpful for disease outbreak prevention? I mean, do you see using telehealth devices for residents every morning, let's just say their temperature and their pulse oximeter reading, to be able to establish before there is a problem or before they go to the dining room? Do you see that as something that people are thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our residents are very social creatures. So if they are, maybe feeling something that should lead them to stay in their apartments, then it's definitely a good preventative measure to use. And maybe they just aren't feeling well enough to actually make the trip down to the clinic. And so that just kind of keeps them well, just to stay in their apartment and still be able to have access to that medical appointment and that kind of help.
Great. And Daphne, what do you think about the usage of telehealth in the interim, not only between at the senior housing community, but maybe in the transition, the successful transition, the potentially post-COVID transition from hospital back to community, and or any sort of transition after a surgery back to the community? How do you see telehealth playing a role there?
Yeah, I think in specifically focusing on COVID for a second, there's a lot of good data to support that there's actually early changes in oxygen saturation that patients aren't aware of prior to. They will look fine and they will feel that they feel fine, and when they actually are medically assessed, they're found to be hypoxic and have had a hypoxic trend for some time. We have an oxygen saturation monitor that can provide rule-based alerts and can show a trend. So I actually have one for my mom, and you're able to really kind of dial into is that trending down before it's an actual problem. So in terms of, and as well as temperature, what's great about the GrandCare devices as well, if a person is using these health devices independently while they have to be able to, stick the oxygen saturation monitor on their finger. Because of the rule-based alerts and the back end tie-in, they don't have to actually know what the number means. So I don't have to tell my mom if it's 88%, you have to call me. I can get a rule-based alert set up on the back end, and then I would be able to be alerted if any of the vital signs are out of range. So in particular with the oxygen saturations, that's hugely valuable. And then, just moving forward, if we think about those post-surgical patients that are going home, those patients that have been, maybe they've been in the ICU or have been discharged from a hospitalization, we're able to see how they're doing in the community, in their home setting, as they downgrade through higher to lower care areas with those vital signs equipment. Because again, as long as they're taking them, we can see, oh wait, things are going the wrong way here. We're having less med compliance. We're having an increased temperature in a post-surgical patient, and it's going to be more and more valuable to keep people either having video visits and intervening in an emergent way rather than getting them to urgent care and emergency rooms where we know that our exposure to any communicable disease is higher. So if we can intervene on the home video front versus intervening in person, that's obviously safer for the resident or patient.
That's great. We have a lot of questions that are coming in here, so I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of them in the next 3 minutes. But if your question didn't get answered, please feel free to email sales@grandcare.com. If you have a question for Nora or Daphne, we will make sure that those questions get answered. There are a lot of questions on price, and that is something that we will definitely reach out and talk with you about, because there's lots of different variables that are concerned with that, especially which devices you use. But here's one for Nora directly, and it is, do you charge the residents for the use of technology, or do you absorb that and provide it as a service?
We do just absorb it and provide it as a service, as an amenity. It comes with being a resident here at Holly Creek.
Okay, that's great. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've certainly been preaching that as a value add, just in the same way that they get, pull cords in every residence, and they get a toilet in their bathroom, and there's a workout center and all of those things. So I think that sounds great. There was one other question, is how do you, and this might not be relevant to what you're doing right now, but it was, how do you manage the health readings? Do you, and I'm not sure if you take health readings right now with GrandCare at or with any other technology, if you take any telehealth readings at Holly Creek, and how you manage those.
Right now, we don't implement that feature with GrandCare at the moment for our residents. We do have another home care branch of our company, CLC, which is Christian Living Communities, called Rhythms Home Care. And so we do have visiting nurses that do come, and should a resident hire that service, then they're the ones that kind of take over those kind of daily vitals for the residents. So right now it isn't implemented through GrandCare, but should we expand it into our health suites, then we'll definitely be looking at that.
And so the question would be, is how would they, would they want to get a third party healthcare providers, or would they potentially use their director of nursing and their nursing staff who are already on staff to manage those vitals? And maybe between Nora and, I know Daphne, when you were working as a nurse, well, you're still working as a nurse, that's not a past tense, but when you were using GrandCare in the community that you were using in the home-based services, how did you hire a third party team to handle the telehealth portion, or did you just absorb that right into what you were doing? I think there's a lot of questions about implementation and staff training, and whether this is a whole brand new thing, or if it's just a different way to get the information.
I think that you can do it however what works for you. And if you're looking at your current workflows and you have a 24/7 nursing workforce that you're able to leverage in order to have them manage and receive those alerts and act on them, be able to act on them, at midnight on a Sunday and you have the staff to do that, that's fantastic. And if you don't have that workforce that is able to manage that, you can dial it back and you can set expectations in terms of, we're going to look at these health readings on Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. They're not for emergent use, and you sort of set that out with your clients, as well as you could even dial it back further if you did not have any medical staff, but you had family that was proficient in a need for a certain individual to have monitoring. I can certainly sell you the blood pressure cuff, and you can have daughter who's a pharmacist manage the blood pressure trends. So you can take it along the continuum, however it is that what works with your current workflows, and then sort of expand from there, I think.
Okay, and we still have a lot of questions, but we're at the top of the hour, so I will ask one more question here of Daphne, and then if you did not get your question answered, please reach out to us, sales@grandcare.com, or feel free to put your information there and we'll reach out to you and answer any questions that you may have. This last question is for Daphne, and it's asking, can you give an example of how you manage chronic disease using telehealth?
I'll just do a real quick one since I know we're pushed for time, but congestive heart failure is a perfect example. So somebody has congestive heart failure. They're living in the home. So what do they need? They need a blood pressure cuff, and they may or may not need an O2 sats monitor. You're using the vital signs equipment to monitor changes in their vital signs. You're using the medication management to keep them compliant with their medications in terms of, their Lasix dosing. You're making changes to that dosing as needed. You're using the touchscreen buttons to provide educational content on their congestive heart failure. So why am I not supposed to eat salt? Little video on whatever it is that they need to learn about their chronic disease. And then you're bundling that up to sort of decide when you need early intervention, so that it's not Sunday night at 1 a.m. when we have to go to the emergency room. We recognize that there's a downward trend on Friday, and then we help make adjustments or a video visit or an urgent care visit.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nora. This is really insightful, and I love listening to you talk about it because I learned something new that you guys are doing with GrandCare as well as other technologies. So thanks so much, Daphne, as always. Pleasure to have you, and thanks, Scott, for helping to run this entire webinar. So next week on Wednesday, we have another webinar that is still focused on technology and telehealth and virtual video chat, but it's focused with the home care provider in mind. And there were some questions about naturally occurring retirement communities in the question, Norks, and that is definitely relevant to what we're going to be speaking about next Wednesday. So feel free to sign up for the webinar if you haven't. Of course, it's free, and we will be posting the recording if you are unable to make it in person. So thanks so much. We'll be live posting on Facebook, on the GrandCare Facebook page as well, if you prefer to visit us that way. So thanks, everybody, and have a great weekend.